Here we are with the great Matthew Allison, the Cankor. You were just explaining at Cankor. Yes. Introduce yourself. Tell me, I guess I just introduced you. So that's unnecessary to ask you to just repeat what I said.
I mean, you're the skin man. I'm the cank man, I guess. That's how that works.
Cank man. Well, you know what was funny is I was imagining in my mind, I was like, because I've seen like a photo of you before, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be funny. Like two bald guys, two old bald guys with glasses. Yeah. And then I was like, well, I'm going to wear my beanie today so that I can, change. So there's some contrast, you see? And then what happened was you showed. This is like,
I can switch. I have a burgundy beanie. If that
no. It's okay. It's okay. I'm liking this. There's some syncopation. So it's a little bit like when you're in school and a kid would call the other kid in elementary school and say, hey, I'm going to wear my cool beanie tomorrow. You wear yours and we're going to be twins.
That never happened to me. I didn't have friends that I had that connection with to dress alike.
Nor did I. I saw other people did, and I was jealous. I was like, oh, you have a cool friend that wants to. Yeah. They're like, for you, what it would be is, hey, they'd call you on the phone. Because back then we had phones like this. He said, hey, Matthew, let's go read comics behind the school alone in the mud. What do you think about that? Is that cool? Oh, you're like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do that. Anyways, okay, so listen, I just want to introduce you. This is the real stuff, okay? Okay. Is that I have admired you, and kind of my admiration, or sort of like for the intensity of what you make and what you do, has grown exponentially. And I think that like I can't tell if I'm projecting onto people all the time, which I think we always do, but where I'm like, this guy has a deep appreciation and love for comics, and also is deeply annoyed by comic stuff, people, culture, like, and so like, I think the thing is that I have just sort of grown to love you from afar as like somebody who I feel like it's very difficult to participate in something as niche and strange and bizarre as comics, without kind of, it's like the nature of being a nerd is to excavate and focus and study everything about something. And in comics, the more you learn about it, the more annoying it is.
Yeah, for sure. I have this thread on Instagram, DM thread with Michelle Fife and Chuck Forsman. And all we do is just complain about comics. We keep it isolated there. And just last week I said, what would happen if we made all this public? If people really knew what we think about comics and different characters and publishers and stuff like that, and like, would it elevate us to like a different level? Would people appreciate it? Or would that just obliterate our careers completely? And they both agreed it would obliterate our careers. So that's all gonna. Well, but it's still, obviously, it still seeps through a little bit if you noticed it.
Well, no, I mean, I'm attuned to it because I'm sort of that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde about a lot of stuff, where I'm like, what happens is I obsess about things and I find out everything about them. Yep. And then I just find out that there's a lot of stuff about it that I don't like. It's like I remember when I got into Van Halen, and I was like, dude, Van Halen's the best. And then the more you learn about bands at that time and David Lee Roth and all this stuff, you're just kind of like, oh, these guys suck, they're scumbags. It's like, I can't even really listen to Led Zeppelin with a clear love anymore without thinking about Jimmy Page having like a 15-year-old wife or whatever. It's like, you can't. It's like, you can't.
I can't tell you how long I deliberated to get this Kiss t-shirt because I hate Gene Simmons so much, but I love Kiss. I have this deep, abiding love for Kiss that will never go away. I love that. I love it a certain era, but he is despicable. So I just,
dude, what's funny is you know how you can sometimes discover what people like in the news part of Instagram. Well, one time I found this Kiss, like, I don't know what it was, or maybe you posted it in your stories and you're like, this is a fake Kiss account that sucks and they don't know anything about Kiss and they suck or whatever. And I went there and I saw you like commenting on it. And I was like, dude, this is hilarious. So I think that I just have sort of picked up clues like Sherlock Holmes of like, oh, I wonder, it's like you care about something so much, but then it's like seeing through the lens of, I think, being deeply entrenched in loving something.
Sure.
It's really hard because it's a struggle. It's like, dude, Gene Simmons is so lame. He's the worst. Yeah. And I just think in our culture now where, you learn more and more about people and you go, oh, they have a lot of flaws. And you realize that there's a lot of nuance to everything. Well, I'm just so desperately happy that Jack Kirby is like a good person and never got, like exposed.
That I know. Died before any of that could come out. Like,
yeah, but I think he was too. Yeah, we would know, and he was too busy to do anything shitty.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, I agree with that, and I feel like we all live our lives out in the open now. It's all out for anybody to see. Your likes and dislikes and your little quirks and things that you could keep hidden before. That's the thing. Taking it back to Kiss, there was a period where their management kept all that tight. They weren't supposed to talk about themselves out of character.
Right.
You saw what they looked like. And then once that went away, then Gene was just like, okay, here I really am. And then I was like, oh man, I don't want to know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I've been able to process that, recently and feel like, well, I can compartmentalize that and just look at the great things that he did and not worry about the deplorable stuff. And that's true of pretty much everything. You have to compartmentalize everything.
Yeah. It's also really interesting, that whole adage about you don't meet your heroes, don't, don't. And it's like, is it really that people, I've met a lot of my heroes and I have, good and bad, sure, reactions, but, it's sort of like, putting things on a pedestal in a way that is totally unrealistic and has more to do with your sort of weird parasocial relationship that you have with like another person. So it's interesting. I remember, who was it? Jim Steranko kind of started tweeting all this like psychotic, like weird, like saying, you're like, dude, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
You really didn't have to do any of that. And like, I don't know. It's interesting. And I think that I was really keyed into how, you have like this sort of moral compass, and it made me like very kind of grateful. Like, oh, this artist that I really like is sort of out here, kind of calling it like it is. And I love that about you. And
thank you.
Yeah. And I do know that is an unpopular and oftentimes alienating stance to take in something like comics, because it's like everybody's afraid of not being cool and stuff, especially in underground comics or like, I don't know how to say it, where it's like not Dark Horse, not Fantagraphics, but down here in the, and I wonder was there ever a moment where you were like, I want to be a professional comic artist? Mm-hmm. And then you realized it's not a world I could really leverage myself into because it would be too bizarre and your relationship with your art would get fucked up and then you'd get sucked into the.
You're talking about why I never made any effort to get into like mainstream comics? Or?
Well, I do have a creepy anthology that has a story that you illustrated.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is cool. But I'm just saying that like, you know, it's weird because if you're like a comic artist, which you are, and then seeing like, what's the best way of doing this for a living? And then having to kind of figure out your own shit. That must've been strange.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I took a very windy path to get where I am now. And, the people that I looked at as inspiration who were, telling very personal stories and expressing themselves, in a way that I found appealing. Guys like Dan Klaus and Jim Woodring, well outside the mainstream, but very popular within the sphere in which they existed. So like in terms of alternative comics, they're at the top. But they're tied to Fantagraphics. And so I always felt like I needed to be tied to a publisher. That was a very crucial element. And I was like, man, I'm too sensitive to go that route where you're just constantly submitting things. And so I never did that. I never was like, hey, take a look at my comics and would you hire me? Would you give me a book? I just kept it all to myself for a very, very long time. And when the internet started and we got high-speed internet at work, back when I worked at a print shop, here and there, I would start to put work up. I was on the Comics Journal forum, I was on this movie forum, and I would just throw artwork just to see what the reaction was. And it was always super positive. So through that, I got invited into this blog called Eaten by Ducks. I don't know if you know Aaron Alfley.
Yes. Yeah. Monster Brains. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had invited me to be part of that. And so that was my first step up where it felt like, okay, here's like-minded artists who are doing something, definitely not mainstream at all, but very personal, but tied into monsters and comic books and all the stuff I love. But never with any intention to break out beyond that. Like I still didn't submit my stuff anywhere. It wasn't like I was trying to get in with Image or trying to get in with Dark Horse even when I had friends that were doing that, I just felt like, man, it's not for me. The creepy thing that you mentioned, that was a total fluke. I found out recently the editor was told by the senior editor never to hire me again because the story was so bad. And my friend kept that for me for years. My friend Damon, who got me that gig, he held on to that for a very long time. And then, excuse me.
Wait, so you wrote the story and the
Yeah, I did all of that. It was like a 2-week down and dirty. We just need to fill in some pages. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure they weren't paying you. It's sort of like, dude, you give me 2 weeks and it's like, I just turn out something kind of cool. And then you want to criticize it. Like, whatever, man.
Well, yeah, but I had only made one comic book up to that point. I didn't know how to script the comic book. I didn't know how to really lay one out. It was totally new to me. And so it was more like the editor was doing my friend a favor. Plus, he was also helping himself by filling in those pages because otherwise they would have had to put in reprints and he would have gotten in trouble. So he did it somewhat under the table. And then when the senior editor finally saw the issue, he's like, how did this person get in here? So,
well, whatever, man. It's not, it's you're rebooting creepy and it's like a million times past its heyday. And like, in my opinion, they kind of lucked out that you were there to like step up, and
well, I appreciate that.
Well, I think that's the, like being like, if you have a title like executive editor or something, it's like, dude, you're already in the way, like,
yeah. But, well, and And both of those people have been canceled. Both of
them. Yeah. Hell yeah. Cancel them, dude. That's what I say. Cancel them for all the reasons. Wait, so this is the thing that I thought, because when you so kindly sent me that beautiful book and the amazing little watercolor illustration, I was very excited about it. I was struck by the kind of like autobiographical non sequitur poetry of your storytelling. And I really was thinking that how cool of an anomaly it was, and that you were really just like, yeah, I'm going to find my way.
Sure.
I'm going to find my way through all this. And I'm assuming that you're kind of like around the age I am. I'm about 43, 44. And I know that feeling of reading Marvel comics or DC comics. I was never really a DC guy, but I did like, Swamp Thing and stuff like that. But like, Marvel comics, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool and everything. But then all of a sudden you get some weird comic that's got like horror in it. And then all of a sudden you see like Charles Burns drawing.
Yeah.
And then you go, wait a minute, what the fuck is this? And then I'm just wondering, what was the sort of like, were there any like big examples of books that you saw? There's like, I remember like 8 Ball and stuff like that, where I was like, oh, this shit could be totally weird. Like, was there any kind of moment when you go, oh, actually, maybe I could do this stuff? Because the thing that you're explaining earlier, I'm gonna let you answer this, but I just remembered was that doing message board stuff and submitting art is a little bit like fanzine stuff.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Which is what Richard Corbin did. That's how he got discovered, and like all, Bernie Wrightson and all this stuff. But anyways, go ahead. Tell me some like big, like some moments where it sort of changed for you, I guess.
I think that, 8 Ball, of course, like I just said, especially because it was just one person doing everything. Yeah. The assembly line stuff, when I got the Marvel tryout book, because that was a big deal for me in like 6th grade, I saw that advertised like, oh, I got to do that. I want to learn how to make comics. And then they take you through the whole process, and just the thought of other people working on something that I was doing. So if I was the penciler and then someone else was going to ink it and someone else was going to color it, like it just didn't feel right to me. So when you see 8 Ball or Love and Rockets, and you're like, these artists are doing this all themselves, they're making all the decisions, that appealed to me more than anything. And Frank Miller was like that to an extent, although he collaborated with people more often than not. But the big moment that really flipped the switch with me was there was an anthology book, I believe from Kitchen Sink, called Buzz.
Okay.
And Charles Burns took those pages from the Marvel tryout book and inked over them and created a whole new story called, I believe, Naked Snack. Uh-huh. And it was just this bizarro riff on Peter Parker dealing with like these pigmen falling out of the sky, and Aunt May, I think, had a bullet hole in the middle of her forehead, and it just was so mind-blowing because that book was so informative for me, the Marvel tryout book, but also this huge disappointment because like I didn't think to, when I did get that book, I didn't think to practice inking on a separate piece of paper. I just went right in with a crow quill thinking, okay, I'm going to ink now.
Yeah.
Totally messed up those pages. So seeing what he did with that, and the idea that you could take this, what many people consider to be trash culture stuff, and recontextualize it. It's still comics. Mm-hmm. It's still the same format and everything, but it takes you into an entirely different world. So that, I think that's the one thing that just stayed with me. So all these other artists that I'm influenced by, like Jim Woodring and a lot of the Marvel and DC guys.
Mm-hmm.
I love Mike Zeck. I love Brian Boland. Any classic Bronze Age, Silver Age artists I really admire. But I didn't feel like I could ever do that work. And I remember Dan Klaus talking about being a kid and looking at brushstrokes in comics and thinking how a human being can't possibly do that. And so he just worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. So, I took that influence of trying to mimic the classic Marvel and DC guys, but spinning it in that Charles Burns type way with his Naked Snap comic. I think that's the biggest influence on me as far as anything that I can pinpoint.
Well, that makes sense because it kind of was a complete paradigm shift from your sort of comics indoctrination idea. Mm-hmm. It's, you don't know that something is possible until it is presented to you, I guess, in a way. And it's sort of interesting because the amount of, of course, Charles Burns is sort of an icon now, but the amount of, I'm assuming would be discouragement and kind of maybe weirdness that Charles Burns experienced on his way to being like, nah, I'm just going to do my thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like everybody's alienation and discouragement kind of moves the marker a little further along.
Yeah.
So you're like, he moved it this far, and then a young Matthew Allison sees it and goes, all right, I'm gonna move it a little bit this way. Yeah. Daniel Clowes lives not that far from me.
Okay.
And I go to the comic shop and I'd see him in there. And
oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like interesting just to sort of, not weird him out. I mean, we talked a few times, but mostly about like snack bars we found around, I'm not trying to be like, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah.
And he would just look at Jack Kirby stuff and weird, like random shit. And it was just kind of interesting to sort of spy on him.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm doing that, but retroactively, because Chicago Comics here in town, they just bought his childhood comic book collection from him. He came back to his parents' old house and he grabbed all his short boxes and he sold them to Chicago Comics. And they've been putting them out for sale. And they still have his handwritten notes that he put on there when he was a kid with graded all the comics. So it would be like VG plus, first appearance of this character. He'll have the writer and the artist on it.
Yeah.
He collected Fangoria, which blew my mind that he was buying Fangoria at the same time I was. So they've got some old Fangos in there.
Dude, that's so funny. Those should not be, that collection should just be like in the Smithsonian or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. As soon as I found out that somebody pointed out that collection had been purchased. So I ran down there and grabbed a couple of comics that we used to own. So.
It was kind of sad. Cause I would, cause Richard Sala lived here too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so they would always be together,
okay.
And then I was like, oh, it's so cool. Just talk to them, and then like when Richard Sala passed away, I was like, oh no, he's going to be like just walking around alone now. I was like, this sucks. I'd see him on Wednesdays, new comic book day.
Sure. Yeah.
But, I guess it's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't know. These were, this kind of reminds me is that, as our generation, who grew up kind of loving this sort of, transition from Marvel to, weirdo comics and strange stuff, and who kind of developed this sort of sense of, okay, this is good, this is bad, this sucks, like all this stuff. It's interesting to see the shift of, comics now being like the pop culture and all this nerdy stuff, but you never see like a cool adaptation of like some bizarre, awesome thing. It's always like kind of this crappy, like I don't know. I did think the Daniel Clowes adaptations were pretty cool. Like they were fun to watch or whatever, but like, anything that Alan Moore did, the way they changed, so I don't know. It's weird. Like I'm just waiting for the black hole movie, but then I'm also thinking to myself, why am I waiting for a black hole movie? I should not.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Somebody did a short, I think they took the scene of the kid walking into the kitchen and seeing the girl's tail.
Oh,
and it was accurate to what happens in the panels. But to me, that's like, I mean, what I like about that is the mark making. I like the artwork. I don't really care about that story. So the idea of like, oh, it's going to be brought to life for that particular thing doesn't really mean much to me. And totally. Stuff like, I like the Ghost War movie, okay, but again, I like Klaus because of the art more than anything else. So once you extract that, the essence is gone to me.
Yeah, totally. I wanna see that movie that Shia LaBeouf made. That was like a total ripoff of Daniel Klaus's story. Yeah. That would have been, I wonder what it's like, it must be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I forgot all about that because I remember he teamed up with Marilyn Manson to make a video. he
Worse.
House, Shia LaBeouf did, and they got high and whatever, and they watched some Jodorowsky movies. Mm-hmm. And then Shia LaBeouf was like, oh, I want to direct your video. And he basically just ripped off scenes from Holy Mountain.
Yeah.
Recreated them. And I was like, all right, but
dude, that's art, man. Hey, so all right. So you were there when Image Comics came out. How like it, because I look back on it and I'm like kind of humiliated about.
Oh, well, your age. So we're like 5 years different. I'm 48, about to turn 49. So I was 18 or 19 when that was happening. You were the perfect age for it.
Oh yeah, 15 or something, 13, something like that. Yeah.
And I worked at a comic book store when that was happening. And I despised kids like you.
Oh, you did?
Oh my God. I would lay into these kids buying that trash. And I'd sit there and I would take, in the comic that I sent you, I've got that, the page that is the ripoff of Ronin with the character putting the sword through him that Mark Liefeld stole in the first issue of, I think it was X-Force.
Yeah.
And I would show those kids, I'd get the issue of Ronin out and I'd get that out and I'd put them side by side. I'm like, look, he's stealing from... They didn't care. They're like, Ronin, I don't want to read that. I want to read Youngblood.
Dude, I'll be like, Ronin looks boring. Give me Brigade. Exactly. Give me Bloodstrike, dude. Stop messing with me, old man. Yeah, well, I did. The thing was that I remember I was very into horror art. I was very into Dungeons and Dragons. So I liked this stuff, but I liked monsters. So I was into the Hulk and I like Dale Keown and, Pitt. I was like, oh, when's Pitt coming out? But I remember having my mom, I got into Sam Keith,
Of course,
and I remember having my mom, I had to get to order this comic called, I think I Before E, I think, I don't know. And you had to be 18 years old because it was like sexual comics and all this random adult stuff. And I remember my mom, I was like, hey, can I get this? I want to get this comic. Will you sign this thing or whatever? And she's like, what? What's all this shit? And I'm like, I just want this thing. I don't care about the other stuff. She's like, okay. But she signed it and I got I Before E in the mail. I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I met him when I was 15. Because there was a comic book store that had like a little comic book art teaching class.
Oh, wow.
In the back. And that's another funny story. And I saw Sam Keith there and I remember I was like, oh my God. And I think I was the only kid that recognized it. I was like, dude, that's fucking Sam
With
Keith.
The mustache. And
he looks like a full on nerd, and I went to him, I was like, hey, I really like your art and I like this sequence that you made where it was just the same drawing. over and over again, but the dialogue was different. I thought that was really cool, you know? And then he just looks at me. He's very sweet. And he just goes, oh yeah, I'm very lazy and I didn't want to draw a different scene. So I just used the same one. You know, he just like, you know, totally. And I was all, oh, okay. I was all right, see you later. And then we're friends now and stuff like that. But it's like a funny, you know, thing to think of. But that moment in time, it felt like, you know, I almost feel like if you had like an Image comic at that time, because of your unorthodox style, I bet you that it would have done really good, because you have like the Jay Lees and the Sam Keith and like, you know, Keith Giffen doing that weird shit. Like, what is all this weird stuff, you know?
Yeah,
so,
there would have been a place for me there. That's the crazy thing is that I look back at it now and I'm like, man, they were doing some cool stuff. And regardless of the quality of the work and how they, you know, how late they were and how that just financially for people, they loved comic books. They loved making comic books. And I appreciate that now as an adult, that at the time, you know, the quality of it and the swiping and all that stuff infuriated me. But I look back and I think, you know, pretty quickly they brought in people like Rick Veitch.
Yeah.
Crazy one shot that I would love to do a follow up to.
Oh.
And I actually have a character. So I have two things lined up after this book comes out, the collected Cankor. I've got this horror book that I'm working on for this year. The next thing I want to do is this character called Slow Burn that I made in 1992. He was very much an Image, you know, he's got the mechanical arms. He's the soldier who was cryogenically frozen.
Yes.
And I at the time I did it because there was a collection of comic book stores. I grew up in Colorado, so I lived in Arvada, which was in between Boulder and Denver. And my boss and some of these other comic book store owners, they formed this little alliance to take on Chuck Rosansky in Mile High Comics, who was the juggernaut.
Yeah.
Not just in Colorado, but all over the United States. And they put on this convention and they had me draw this card that they foil stamped and it had my character on it and everything. And I made it deliberately like something that you would see in an Image book, even though that wasn't at all what I was into at the time. I just knew that that's what
you understood the assignment.
Yeah. But, you know, the character was supposed to be, like I said, he was the soldier who was cryogenically frozen. You've seen it a billion different times.
Yeah.
And he comes back in the future. But the thing is at the time, the Gulf War was happening. And I was scared to death that I was going to get drafted.
Whoa.
It really seemed that was the case. You know, I'm 18. And it was, so I think I channeled my fears of that into that character. Yeah. So because so much of what I do is autobiographical, that's what this book is going to be, is that character essentially being me trying to avoid the draft by getting involved in this program, but then waking up in an era that's way, way worse.
Which is now. You're like, dude, you didn't even have to say it.
Yeah.
You didn't have to say it.
So that's next on my slate after I do this horror.
Wow, dude, that's so exciting, man. That's I'm looking forward to that, because cool. The collected Cankor is just like a book. This is a full-on book, and you're not doing Kickstarter. You're doing Fundraiser, which is fundraiser. That's the new superhero.
Right.
Wait, so you were saying that you feel like Kickstarter has been kind of shitty or something. Is that, or what's going on? Like what's your feelings about that?
So basically, like 2 days before I announced that I was going to start my Kickstarter campaign, which was back in December, I was getting ready to gear up for it. I put together a mock-up of my book and I put the Kickstarter logo on it. And I threw it up on Instagram and I said, hey, in February, I'm going to run this campaign. And then immediately got a text from somebody who's like, ooh, aren't you worried about the backlash against Kickstarter right now? I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
Fill me in. So he called me. He explained that they had just made this announcement that they're moving their operations to the blockchain. They're embracing NFTs. And people were losing their shit all over Twitter. Well, I hadn't been on Twitter for over a year since the election. Off my phone, so I didn't know any of this. So I'm reading all this. I'm like, oh my God, I just announced I'm doing a Kickstarter, and 2 days ago, and you see like all these people like Jeff Parker and Greg Pak and all these other artists, like I'm never using Kickstarter again. I didn't know enough about it. Like I didn't even know what the blockchain was at that moment. So I started doing a lot of research, and I was like, man, I have to do this campaign in February no matter what, just because I already got the ball rolling with my printer. There's supply chain issues, and the longer I wait, the further back it could push my book. So I was being told, well, you could have your book like end of June, early July, if you get us the files and the deposit at the end of March. So I was like, well, I have to do something. And I don't really want to hitch my wagon to Kickstarter right now.
Because they're on the blockchain.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I had to educate myself on what the blockchain even was.
Right. We're old guys. We don't want to know about no damn blockchain.
No. And I also, I'm old enough to know that it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. At some point, you're going to have to fall asleep. And when you wake up, you're going to be in the blockchain. It's headed that way. I just don't want to be part of it happening now. I don't want to be seen as being like, yeah, we're all heading to the blockchain. And
dude, blockchain.
Yeah. So fundraiser seemed like a good option for me.
That's cool.
I got a few hiccups here and there, but it's my first fundraising campaign. So I was going to have hiccups wherever I went. And it's been awesome. I've almost doubled my goal in like 4 days.
It's incredible, man. I'm so excited. I think everybody should get into this because of all the people making these autobiographical, intentional narratives and stories that are kind of just endlessly interesting to me.
Sure.
I love it. I think you're doing my favorite ones, man. It's so cool. And like, I'm a deep, deep fan of that intense line work, shadows and shading and stuff like that. And I was thinking to myself, when I look at your art, I'm like, this is where some of the intense, that energy goes, into this. So you have this book coming out, everybody should jump on that. But then the horror thing, but are you like, so you at some point, decided to not sell comic books to snot-nosed kids that don't know the difference between Ronin and Youngblood or X-Force, and then somehow figured out how to be an artist, I guess, for a living. Like that must have been, is there sort of a slow, gradual process to that? Or is this,
well, you could almost say there was a slow burn. But no, like, as soon as you started saying that, it's like, well, that's basically what I did with my art. Cause I had every intention of being a comic book artist when I was in junior high and high school. That's all I wanted to do was draw comic books. And I went to art school in 1992, and I failed a math class. They told me I needed to retake it. And I'm like, well, I just won't come back.
Yeah. That's what I did. Yeah. Same thing.
And, I went through a horrible breakup at the same time. And I just I got a job at a print shop, and I worked in printing for 25 years instead of drawing comics. So, I really just it's been, I did the first Kankor comic in 2011, and I was 38. So I've only been doing this for 10 years. There was a huge gap of time where I wasn't making comics or art really, other than sketches and little drawings here and there. So it's a relatively new experience for me to be creating stuff like this.
Yeah, but that's okay, because Jack Kirby created Fantastic Four #1 when he was 44.
Yep.
So so it's never too late to join the party.
Yeah.
So, okay. You were when you were 18, you thought you were going to get drafted. You were really afraid of that because they were like going to not, instituting the draft is a really big deal to do, I think. Yeah. But I remember that, when that happened, when I was like, oh, we're at war now. And then you would look on television and there would be like missiles going everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if people now, understand that it used to be on TV, you could watch wars, like missiles and shit, and it was just in your face. And I think that they stopped doing that. And I remember that they stopped doing the Vietnam. Basically, one of the reasons that the popularity or the feasibility of Vietnam kind of ended was because you could see dead bodies on television. Yep. And so it's interesting because even though there's the internet happening, it's like we're so much more removed. It's like
you got to dig deep for that stuff. I think it's out there, but we don't want to see it. We've had it for, that's the thing. I mean, the war never ended. It started then, and then it's just been going perpetually. And so I just feel like it's a thing that we've just come to accept as a daily part of life. And, but you're right. I mean, at the time there was that you were seeing all this stuff happen on the news. And then we at the shop, we got these Desert Storm trading cards.
Oh, I remember.
You'd see all the different types of weapons, all the different types
what kind of CIA propaganda?
Yeah. And so there's kids coming in and they're buying the new X-Force, and then they're buying a pack of Desert Storm cards. Dude. And to me, it was just so bizarre. It was just so weird. And
oh my God.
Today that happened.
Well, you'd have the Operation Desert Storm, but you see this sort of fringe propaganda stuff taking place. I mean, I remember, I'd go to a flea market and you'd see a Bart Simpson, t-shirt with Bart Simpson as a soldier kicking a brown person's ass, and it's like America, you know, and you're like, what, dude?
Part of my job was my boss's brother had a Chinook camper truck, and we would load that thing with long boxes and take it out to the flea market every week.
Yeah.
And I'm in the back in the camper with all these long boxes, like holding them as we're on the highway, trying to get to the flea market without these long boxes falling on me. And that was it. I mean, that was the attitude with a lot of the people. And honestly, like if I was to say, well, why didn't you want to get drafted? I was against the war for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be in a platoon with the kind of kids that I was seeing at the flea market who were bought. Like I didn't want to.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. You had kind of like a front row seat to seeing who it was. Yeah, because it is kind of weird if you're kind of a sensitive, caring person who is consistently excavating their personal interior life, and you go to a flea market and you see like whoever these people, people who maybe haven't had the chance to develop the same kind of internal sensitivity or whatever. Yeah. And you realize that they're all susceptible. Yeah. When people don't have something to care about, they kind of will be told what to care about, I think, and so it's just I'm listening to an audiobook right now about the gun industry and the NRA and how they manipulate their supporters in that very same way of like, okay, we're going to give you something to care about and something to rally behind. And it's that you're being victimized. Yeah. That's been the way for decades. That's really a huge aspect of, I guess, like our modern discourse is it's like you could boil it down to two messages. One is you have something, somebody's trying to take it from you. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is it doesn't have to be like this. There's enough for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, exactly. and it's like, so you kind of like, you're like, I'm a little more on this side where I'm like, I don't, and I think that, the messaging of that is, and it's all the propaganda. I mean, I don't even know if all of it is totally at this point, the propaganda machine of what we do to ourselves is sort of just like on its own. It's self-fulfilling at this point. Yeah. But I remember, I'd go to the comic shop and there'd be like, a serial killer collector cards and, I don't know, a military comic thing or whatever. It's like, it feels like, you know how the military kind of is very into supporting and continuing Transformer films or something, or Marvel, where it's like, it's all about military might and it's about enforcing things. Like, I kind of wonder how funny that would be if, you know, the CIA and the government was, you know, hey, you know, contacting Rob Liefeld and they're like, hey, we need you to ramp it up a little bit, bud. We need these kids, you know, and you think about it and you look at those comics and you're like, dude, these are totally militaristic. Like,
so, you know, that's another thing. Like, I just had the realization, I bought the issue of X-Force that Liefeld plotted and Mike Mignola drew.
Right.
And I didn't read that stuff when it was coming out. I've read very little of it now, but I'm reading this thing. I'm like, man, this whole thing just reads like the scenes in Aliens when all the Marines are packing up their gear and loading their weapons and they're shit talking each other. Like, that's what this whole comic is. And everybody loved that stuff. And Aliens is a very anti-military film. And yet the kids I went to school with loved it. They loved all that military stuff, the Marine aspect of it. When Platoon and Full Metal Jacket came out, they didn't see those as anti-war movies. They were all like, you know, there are horrifying scenes of them torturing people and they loved that stuff. They thought it was funny.
You're like, nah, this isn't funny. But I think it's because it's like the bubble we live in where, you know, and that's why, you know, 9/11 was such a impacting kind of an event, because it was like the first time anybody could see themselves in America, could see themselves as, oh, wait, bad stuff could happen to me. Like, what? You know, it's really interesting because in most, you know, countries and places, it's kind of, you know,
it's day to day.
Yeah, it's day to day. It's totally normalized. And I think that we have this like kind of bizarre isolationist island idea where nobody, you know, you ask somebody in America what is going on in any other country, they're like, what's, I don't know.
No, yeah. I mean, all that information's out there. Nobody, like I said, nobody wants to see it. I remember, I'm sure this is not at all where you wanted this conversation to go.
No, it's okay. I don't care. Whatever, man.
I remember when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
I was not shocked in the least. And I don't mean to say that as like, I knew it was coming or anything like that. Right. In hindsight, I look back, my dad had died like 2 years before that, you know, horrific motorcycle incident. So my brain was already shocked at that point. I had already gone through that trauma. So anything that happened after that, and even like with the pandemic, like it just, horrible stuff can just happen like that. And because of what happened to my dad, that mindset suddenly took over. So I was at work and I remember people freaking out. Like, why would this happen? I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. I went to the record store that day and bought the new Slayer album, which had just came out. I drove around the city, which was completely empty, listening to God.
Dude, that's very surreal. I mean, it is interesting to have such a insulated gun, like, you know, like, I don't know, like a crushing jingoistic sort of patriotic attitude and like an insane gun culture. Yeah. But it's like all posturing, because as soon as something is inconvenient for somebody, they lose their shit and crumble to the ground.
Oh yeah. Well, you remember when Instagram went down for like half a day? People lost their minds.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a big deal. Okay. It's a big deal. But like, I remember when my dad, every once in a while, my dad would show up for the weekend, you know, he would get us on the weekends sometimes, but you know, it was like very give and go, you know, we don't know. But I remember one time he took me to this flea market and I saw this shirt. It was a Rambo shirt, you know, and flea market is just, it's so bootleg. Like I'd buy a Batman shirt, but the Batman symbol would be like messed up and morphed. Yeah. It was like not the Batman symbol. You know what I mean? Somebody drew it somewhere on a napkin. Yeah. But I remember as I saw, I was like, oh, hell yeah, Rambo shirt. That's tight, you know? Cause I was, you know, second grade.
Mm-hmm.
I was into commando. I thought that stuff was cool. I mean, I was fully propagandized to think all this stuff was cool. I would draw ninjas. I would draw tanks. I would draw Godzilla. I was really like, it's very masculine action violence. And I remember I saw this Rambo shirt and I was like, oh, this shirt's cool. And it had like an American eagle on it and all this stuff. And then, but on that table, there was all these other shirts that were like military shirts, and they were progressively more threatening and violent. Like, and my dad bought me some. And I remember because one is like, it's a guy with a gun in the bushes and it says death through superior or peace through superior firepower. You know, and another one is mess with the best, die like the rest. And it's like all this stuff. And my mom, like, you know, he drops me back off at home and my mom sees these shirts. She's like, you think you're going to wear these to your second grade school? No, you're not wearing. And I was like, oh, that's okay. But I didn't really like them because I kind of inside myself knew that they were not good. It was like, I was like, this isn't my message. I'm unhappy and I'm upset. But this is not my specific message.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think that, you know, that, like you said, you're indoctrinated into it. I was just talking to my wife last night about the fact that my parents bought me Chinese throwing stars, butterfly knife, kendo stick. Like I had this ninja catalog and I was like, can you write me a check? And so I can buy some of this stuff.
Hell yeah.
And a friend of mine took the butterfly knife. He's flipping it all around, stabbed himself in the leg.
Dude, what do you think's gonna happen, dude? Mess with the best, die like the rest, dude.
That's right. Kill them all.
You guys are cranking Slayer with your military shirts on, doing butterfly flips.
And, you know, I mean, part of me is like, it formed who I am, all that. I mean, I saw violent, super crazy horror movies from the time I was like 4 years old. I remember I've told this story a lot. I distinctly remember my parents taking me to the drive-in to see The Incredible Melting Man. They showed me the ad in the paper that day. I was like 4 years old. And, you know, here's this poor astronaut who comes back to Earth and his body starts to disintegrate and he's walking around the woods, ripping fishermen's heads off and his ear comes off in a tree. My parents are cracking up laughing the whole time. And I felt horrible for him. At that age, you think that's real. I thought it was like a documentary to me, this poor guy falling apart like that. But, you know, if I hadn't seen that, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Right.
You should see that at 4 years old. But,
well, you know what's so funny is at 4 years old, you're like, no, the melting man. And now like 4 years old are like on the internet looking at amputee porn or something.
I can only
You're like, and they're like, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, God.
No, but you know, I mean, I saw like horror stuff too. I was more of like, I was into, Beastmaster and stuff like that. I was like, damn, dude, this is so cool. Like, you know, and I remember just having my mind captured so immediately and then just never freed from this sort of horror fantasy stuff like that. And I'm really looking forward to your horror, your next book. That's going to be cool. Cause I just don't feel like anybody does it the way I want to see it, like horror stuff. Graham Ingalls, Bernie Wrightson style. I want to see those crazy reveal splash pages and, eerie and all this stuff. And I don't feel like anybody does it right, man. Look at this.
The splash
Holy shit, dude. That's amazing. God damn, that's cool.
It was originally going to be part of the thing. Probably can't see it.
Dude, that fucking rules.
But I'm the same way. Like, that's the thing. And when you did your comic, when Skin Crawl started to develop that, I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Because like you and I have that same sensibility of like, it's about the art. It's about making these really cool creatures and all that stuff. But the one thing you said to me when you sent me the PDF and the email is like, I don't want to do anything high-minded, like serious stuff. And at the time, I was scripting my thing, and I was very much like, I got a Moby Dick quote in the front of the book.
Oh,
like,
nice.
I'm being very high-minded about it, but the artwork is going to be the complete opposite of that. So
that's okay. I mean, I think that like, I feel my inclination is to do things that are sort of high-minded or just emoting. I love weird horror. I love connection. I love intensity. I love all this stuff. But I feel like I was feeling a little bit hesitant, like I'm dipping my toes into something that I love so deeply, and that other people and my friends are all there's a lot of, it's very sacred, doing art, comics. And so I'm like, okay, well, I have to just kind of do what I'm going to do and do my best and hope that people like it. And I think that when you do something kind of earnest, that it's a little bit beyond the criticisms of the sort of cynical people, because everything is so contrived and it's going to be like this and I'm going to do this and all that, and in comics with like, not like mainstream comics, I do feel a little bit afraid, because I know a lot of comics people that are like me who love this stuff so much, but can feel like kind of critical and flippant and just like, it's nothing. It's not, it's like, dude, this took me a year. And you're like, I don't care.
that's the difficult thing about comics. And it's one of the detriments of the whole, Wednesday LCS, New Comic Book Day aspect of it is, Chuck Rosansky from Mile High Comics, he calls it people coming in to get their brick. They're going to get their stack of comics every Wednesday. Yeah. And they're just going to blaze through them, and you go on to the next one. And it's daunting to think, okay, I'm just going to slip my comic in with that pile of all these other comics. So if you try to make something that's really going to stand outside of that, that's the beauty of doing Kickstarters and fundraisers and all that stuff, is that you are making something that is separate from the Wednesday. This is like an event to put this thing out. And I think that's important to help elevate comics, so where it isn't just like, oh, I'm just buying this stuff and then I'm super excited because they're going to turn my favorite comic into a show. I want people to just be excited about the comic itself. And that same thing happened with Skin Crawl, obviously.
Yeah. Well, the stuff that you make is like, it is different. I mean, it's interesting to look at, say, something where you're like, when I'm making this, I'm like, this is going to be special and cool, and I'm going to make it important. And, I'm kind of like Dan Pussy, you know what I mean? Like I'm my own, like weird, like, I'm the auteur, I'm doing a cool thing. And it's like, nobody cares, like, and so that's for anybody out there who doesn't know, Dan Pussy is a character by Daniel Clowes. Highly recommend investigating that. I was looking recently at, say Todd, my idea is, this is my theory. Todd McFarlane, highly competitive person, saw that Rob Liefeld's Deadpool was doing really, really good and doing great. So then all of a sudden he's like, I got to make a Spawn universe to compete with Rob Liefeld. This is what I'm thinking. Right. Sure. And so I go and I look at, so I don't care about Spawn. I like the first, 10 issues or whatever, but, and it's great. And I love Todd McFarlane, everything he does, illustration wise, you know what I mean? So I see these new Spawn comics and I'm like, it's just so weird, because it's kind of considered whoever these illustrators are, the highest level shit. This is the highest level stuff. And I couldn't care less. Yeah. It's like Metallica releasing a new album or something, where it's like, okay, this is fine. Sure. All right. It's okay. And so I'm like, all right, well, is it me that's jaded? And then I go, no, because I read tons of comics and love them, but they're just not this format, which is essentially the success format of when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I know what you're talking about. That makes total sense.
Yeah. I look at it, I'm like, I want to care about this. Like I want, and it's weird because I'll look at a Savage Dragon comic now and I'll go, oh, this is cool. But I look at the Savage Dragon, like I'll look at the old Savage Dragon issues, the first, little mini series. And I'm like, dude, this is sick. This is so cool. And so like something happens over time. I don't know what it is. So I would rather, for me, just take a shitload of time, make something kind of special that I'm super annoyed about finishing. I don't want to do it anymore because it's annoying after 6 months, and then be like, check it out, and have people be like, dude, this is crazy. What the fuck? Instead of, monthly cranking things to the point where you're kind of just like not caring that much.
Yeah. That never appealed to me. And you see, the guys that are continuing to do it on a relatively regular basis, like the Hernandez brothers,
oh God,
Rockets, but they've switched up the format. They've gone and done other things. Like, they'll come back to that stuff when they want to. They don't feel obligated to be like, okay, it's got to be a regular format comic every month or every 2 months or whatever. Like, that's where you get stifled and you start to get repetitive and all of that stuff. And they've been able to balance that really, really well.
Yeah, I think that the idea that something can kind of move and shift and change, that artwork doesn't have to be a static product over and over and over again. And I think that that's why I hold Jack Kirby in my heart as, somebody who's like trying to just live in the moment in a lot of ways, And I think that that's what's so interesting about comics is they kind of originated as sort of a product. Then they transcended everything.
Yeah.
And then now here we are at sort of late capitalism where everybody's trying to make them a product again. And it's like, dude, comics can transform the world. They can tell any story. They could do anything. Mm-hmm. You could tell that they're really limitless. So, I guess like in a way, I'm just really excited to know that you're participating in that, because it continues to make me want to do what I'm doing.
Sure.
And I'm just grateful for you. I'm glad that I got to talk to you and meet you and stuff. And maybe one day we'll collaborate on some stuff or do something, or I'll do something for you. I still want you to do something for a Skin Crawl, some kind of pinup or something. I don't know, whatever you got time for, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. When you're talking to me about these flea market experiences, and I'm like, man, we've got some similarities there, and we could probably work that into this slow burn comic of the military side of it. So I'll probably pick your brain about that some more.
Oh yes. And I also feel like the thing about how the CIA and the government has tried to force propaganda of military might and imperialism through comics, like dude, what a crazy concept. Like Rob Liefeld, the CIA visits Rob Liefeld's office, and like, dude,
about this theory about the song Winds of Change by the Scorpions, that was put together by the CIA.
No.
The whole podcast about it. Listen to the podcast Wind of Change.
Okay.
And it goes through the whole history of the CIA and the Berlin Wall coming down, and them working with the Scorpions supposedly to put out this song. So it's not that far from.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the CIA, there's this amazing, you would love Brad Trammell. Do you like Brad Trammell?
I don't know the name.
Okay. He does all this. I'm going to send you a link, but he does all these stories and podcasts about, the art world and how stupid it is and how great things are and how dumb other things are. And he has one about the CIA and how they infiltrated the arts in order to shift the cultural potency of America to be the head of things during the Cold War, because it's like we're fighting Russia on all fronts. But I like, it's like, remember that Simpsons episode when they formed the boy band remember that? Even Net Niage, which is join the Navy in reverse. Dude, and Bart Simpson, like, even Net Niage. And they're like, what is this? They're like, oh, you're using our children to try to get people to join the Navy, So I remember having a conversation with when I turned or when I was 17, I got a phone call from the military, about, hey, you know, are you gonna, you know, you thinking about joining, you know, you're about to turn 18 and stuff. And I was like, no, I'm depressed. I hate my everything. I'm gonna die. I was like, I listen to 9 Inch Nails. I hate you. I want to fucking kill my town. I hate my mom and dad, you know. And he's like, okay, son, all right. I hear.
Well, you know, I mean, they would find a place for you nowadays.
Oh yeah, I'd be at the head of the pack now. They'd be like, get this 9 Inch Nails kid up at the machine gun turrets, dude. He's gonna annihilate. Well, I guess I've kind of taken up your time. I don't know if there's anything you feel like you want to talk about. Okay, everybody needs to get into Cancor, the collected issue. I'm gonna put the link to support it in the description of this. I'm going to make this interview public so that more people could see it. Perfect. And so I could share it more and stuff like that. But I think you're awesome. I think you're doing the stuff that I love about comics so deeply. And I'm just really, you have such a resonant power to your illustration and your style and what you bring. And I'm just grateful for you.
Well, I'm honored that you say that, man, because I've loved your stuff for a long, long time. So to be sitting here talking to you and hear you say that is amazing. Totally.
Hell yeah. Even that Niage, homeboy.
That's right.
Even that. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Get ready to support this project because it's going to blow your goddamn mind. I'll tell you that much. All right.